Drake Mattingly, welcome to the Anxious Resistant. We're doing some interview series, and I'm super happy and thrilled to have you here. For those out there, Drake and I work together at the same hospital, and we work inpatient psychiatry together. We've been working together a little over a year now. That's how long I've been there, and you've been there the whole time. And we've gotten to know each other well over the time, and we've been able to experience a lot of different things together. And I'm a registered nurse where we work. Drake is a very experienced behavioral health specialist who has been there for some time as well and has a lot of interesting things that we can talk about and draw on. So just to start out with, Drake, if you just would introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about what you do as a behavioral health specialist.
So thank you very much, Burke. My name is Drake Mattingly. I'm originally from Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been living here in Utah for the last few years, and when I really came, to Utah as an adult, I wanted to go ahead and get involved in healthcare. And so I started out as a psychiatric technician over at the Utah State Hospital, and I worked there for about 3 years, and it was very demanding. It was very hard. That's the place where they send a lot of the patients that have the most severe cases of mental health issues and or behavioral issues as well.
Right.
And they send them on that way. Then I decided I want to work my way up, go ahead and see and try out life at a different facility and hospital. I've always loved mental health. And in fact, I studied a few courses before I began that first job. And I feel like that's kind of what started me into that whole process because it's difficult for mental health sometimes because most people think, oh, you have to have a graduate degree to work in mental health. And you think, well, I at least have to be a registered nurse or a social worker, a psychologist, or even a physician to go ahead and do it. And that's not true. There are people like me who are behavioral health specialists, or in other places, they call them mental health technicians or psychiatric technicians. And it all depends upon where you're at, truly. But sometime after working at the state hospital, I then went ahead and started working at the University of Utah, where I was a on a psych med floor, and it was kind of the overflow. So I went ahead and started working at the University of Utah, and it was on a med psychiatric floor and a geriatric floor as well. So I, over the years, had gotten exposure at the state hospital, working with general psychiatry, working in pediatrics, and I opened up a forensics unit. And then with my experience with the University of Utah working both med psych and geriatrics, I felt like I had really covered my bases and I had really come to understand the general scope as to what inpatient psychiatry is. So I feel like I've had a little bit of everything.
We're already going off script because I want to ask you kind of what the difference is between what you would do in a geri psych unit versus the forensics unit versus, you were at the state hospital, so that's long-term care. I mean, most of those patients are committed for at least 6 months, and so it's kind of a different feel. Can you explain to us, kind of some of the differences that you know, in your experiences at each of those different places?
Right. So I feel like the principal difference is all in the milieu. It's all in that therapeutic environment which they have set up. They will go ahead and they will establish for med psych, it's generally a short-term stay. So they'll set up therapy to be more based around that, to
Okay.
be short-term bases. Wherein for Jerry psych, it's more, potentially long-term. Someone could be there for quite some time. It's all depending upon the individual, but the whole milieu's kind of shifted towards that population. We'll have
Okay.
more social workers that are more specialized in geriatrics. They'll have more, nurse practitioners that have certifications, if not specialties, in geriatrics, and they just kind of shift from one to another. And it's the same thing for pediatrics. All the specialists will change, but really the people who keep the milieu going, it's us techs. We kind of set the tone as to what that therapeutic environment is going to look like, and whether it be long term or short term, we try to give our best, and it gets
Right.
hard. It gets
Yeah.
hard sometimes because sometimes you're not used to a certain kind of population. For example, I had a really hard time with pediatrics. I do not have normal encounters with children. That's something that just does not happen for me. And so that was really hard to remember. Oh, they're little people. They're people that we uh, that that deserve all the same treatment as another person, but you have to remember they're still on that learning curve of childhood. And
Right.
so it's difficult in every situation, but that's the thing. Every single person can find their niche.
Yeah.
I really like short-term stay stuff because with long-term psychiatry, it's more of a living situation for them. It's no longer just an overnight or 72 hours in a hospital. This is their life. That room that's at the hospital is their home for the time being. And
Right. So just for a little clarity, so like where you and I work right now,
yeah,
you usually say the average stay is what, 3 to 5 days.
yes,
And that is pretty average. We do have patients that are there for, a month or two, and sometimes, they're only there for a day or a night or two. So, but yeah, so I mean, that kind of, I like what you're saying. It is different environment. You set up things differently because of how long the person is going to be there. So again, you worked ped psych,
yes,
you've done geriatric psych,
yes.
you did forensics unit. Can you tell me a little bit about the forensics? Like
Yeah. So
what makes forensics different from the other, like say where we work right now, that's pretty general.
yeah. So sometimes there are individuals that get tangled up with the law and they have to await a court hearing. Well, that court hearing could be set up to go ahead and to it could be set up so that they could eventually go to jail, and they're trying to see if they're competent to serve time in jail, and or they might go ahead and they might try to say this individual is just too psychotic to go ahead and be in front of a court. Let's send them to you guys and let's try to figure some things out. They're not suited for jail. They're not suited for a general psych unit because they do have a history that could very most of the time be violent, and or just not proper for another psychiatric facility. And so a lot of what we did was everything was based on our charting. Everything was based on our charting. We had many individuals who were trying to go ahead and escape the possibility of going to jail. They'd rather hang out in a psych ward rather than go to jail. Some of them were, frankly, child molesters and or had a history of sexual violence. And those individuals in jail really get a very hard time, if not have a huge target on their backs. So being in a psych ward is generally the safest thing to do for them. Well, throughout the day, we talk to them and we go ahead and we try to monitor and observe them to say how psychotic they are.
Yeah.
Because we could understand perhaps maybe they're just trying to go ahead and win the Oscar by frothing at the mouth and lashing themselves everywhere. It's really, we're expecting them to go ahead and react in a certain way. But when they're in an environment where things are more calm and it's their everyday, their guard drops. And your job is to chart that exactly.
So your your charting
Yeah.
plays a role in kind of what ends up happening to these patients, is what you're saying, right? Your assessment will determine kind of where they end up.
Yes. And
Okay.
along that, they will also be evaluated by a psychologist at the end. Our charting usually leads up to that. So it allows them to go ahead and see they're going to be competent enough to go ahead and at least speak to a psychologist who can then go ahead and do a test or an exam. And the thing is, many people will be involved in it long enough to remember everything that you ask them. They will know the test by heart. They will know what to say, what not to say. From there, the psychologist has nothing to go on other than our word. And so, our diligence in charting is extremely important. So that's kind of what happens in forensic psychiatry.
Okay.
Time.
So, sorry, just remind me one more time. The forensics unit you worked on, was that at the state hospital or was that at Utah State Hospital? Okay. So, I mean, that kind of leads me into the next question I want to ask a little bit because you've already alluded to it a few times. Working in psychiatry can be very difficult and emotionally taxing, not just for, the people that are there, the patients, but the staff, the workers as well. You and I included. Working peds, you mentioned was tough because you have to remember that these kids are still like developing. There's still a lot that they're figuring out. And then in forensics, a lot of these people, they're trying to manipulate you, right? They're trying to get through the system and have the best sentence possible and end up with, being committed to a psych unit instead of going to jail, right? So what are some of the things that you found that you enjoy doing that help you kind of bear that emotional burden of working where you've worked for so long?
Well, frankly, Burke, it's actually taken a long time. It's taken a very long time to go ahead and do that. But ultimately, I think what I found is that you are a product of your environment. And if you're able to make your home a place of refuge for you to rest, then it sets it up to where you are in a therapeutic environment for yourself. Being a caretaker, we oftentimes forget to care for ourselves.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen nurses or techs like myself forego lunch breaks or even just normal breaks to blow off steam just to be there for the patients. Learning to take breaks and breathers is perhaps one of the hardest things you can do because it's hard, We get in a mentality of the value of others is more important than ourselves. And yet we're just as human. We bleed just as red. Which is why I have developed a fairly unhealthy coping skill. I go on vacation.
I wouldn't say that's unhealthy unless you're
Have you seen
going
my
into debt for vacation.
But lots of vacations, lots of plans, and changing of environment.
Yeah.
One of the things I've recently tapped into that's really helped out a lot has been training for marathon, just long runs. And what makes that so appealing is that there's a mental clarity that comes with it. You can zen out in a sense. You are so focused in on one single task of running and not falling and tripping, mostly not eating gravel, that you provide yourself a mental clarity. And then after that, you get the runner's high and you feel better already. And it's just our recipe for success, in my opinion. And that's me. And that's taken a long time to get into that. And I'll be very honest with you. I don't think most people are psychiatric technicians as long as I have been.
Hmm. I would agree.
Where
You've been
most
doing it for a
people
while.
are in the midst of nursing school and or they're planning to be social workers or something else, and they usually don't have that long of an exposure to it. But for those of us who do have long-term careers as psychiatric technicians, mental health techs, etc., finding that ability to go ahead and have balance is a unique thing. So
How many years has it been now for you in psych?
it's been about eight.
8? Okay.
About eight. I started in 2006, February 2016, so it's getting pretty close to eight.
And probably the average for most psych techs is probably just like a few years, 2, maybe 3, you know,
Yeah,
if
it's
even
funny. I
that,
hear people
right?
say, "Oh, he's a veteran and he's been around for 3 years," and I think,
You're like 3? Come on, try 8.
right.
So yeah, that's a lot. I kind of wanted to ask you, when you do these long runs of yours, which, is something that I don't particularly love to do. So I'm glad that it's something you like to do. But do you feel like, when you do these long runs, are you listening to music or are you just kind of with your own thoughts when you do it?
I really like to just focus in and hone in on breathing.
Okay.
So I've tried it with music. I've tried it without music. I think I have better results without music because if I can go ahead and keep a beat with my breath and just a very slow, steady breath, and I can just pay attention to how much I am breathing, then I feel like I have much better results and I can run much longer. Recently I've been doing about 10 kilometers, uh,
Peace.
2 to 3 times in a week. And it's been really good for me. But there are moments where I will notice that I will have to go ahead and really just hone in on that breathing rather than going ahead and just listening to music.
So when you feel like that's pretty therapeutic for you, do you it just kind of
Right. Which is very interesting that most of the time when we offer DBT skills or coping skills to patients, breathing is one of those that we offer.
yeah.
Breathing and exercise is oftentimes a really good coping skill too that people tap into. Right.
Drake, you've been around psychiatric care for a while, so you've seen a lot of different things. What are some issues, kind of like maybe even systemically or at the different hospitals that you've been at, that you think really need improvement to help with the overall care for mental health patients, not just patients, but staff, as well as, we know that mental health applies to the entire community too. So, what are some things that you've seen that need change? They need improvement.
Politics.
Okay, well,
Uh,
here we go.
Politics. I don't know if you were expecting that.
Elaborate a little bit. Tell me what you mean by that.
Because so many facilities require funding from the government,
Hmm.
whoever's really in charge gets to figure out where that money goes. For the state hospital, one of the difficult things was that no matter how well you performed as an individual, your increase of income was based upon who was in office.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking about the Oval Office, but
So you're
your local
state
government.
government, right?
Yeah, your state government. And so
So
your governor was very involved in determining how much money goes into your hospital and your facility. And that's also a problem with other nonprofit organizations that receive grants from various different bodies of the government. Hospitals like our own generate plenty of money from patients and really still keep that nonprofit title at a very loosely, frankly.
and
But
again, you're talking about Intermountain Health, right?
correct, Intermountain
Okay.
Health.
Which is a
Um,
nonprofit organization,
right.
but which just means that there's not a board of shareholders that make money, as the company grows necessarily. There's not
Correct.
like a profit, but whatever money is earned by Intermountain Health gets put back into the system, right? Back into Intermountain Health. But that doesn't mean like, putting it back in could mean a whole lot of things. That could mean the executives, get a massive paycheck, which would still be nonprofit because you're paying your employees. So it's kind of, I just kind of want to establish what the difference is here between a nonprofit and a for-profit, because, we do see both. We have nonprofit hospital systems and we do have for-profit hospital systems as well. So back into it though, you're talking about how policy from the state government affect, your work at the state hospital, but it also affects, the overall mental health system.
The same goes for smaller clinics, outpatient clinics as well. They require money to go ahead and keep things going, and they will ask for grants to go ahead and open up to offer other services and or hire more staff, and ultimately can or do or don't depending upon who's there and what's the availability.
I guess I think I want to ask this question of, because it's important to me too. I have worked for both for-profit hospitals and nonprofits. So, and there's definitely a difference in the feel in how it's run, because I feel like a for-profit is probably going to cut every corner that they can so that they can make their bottom line and their shareholders happy. But I guess what my biggest question is what do you think we can do to help like hold not just nonprofit but for profit as well as like state government accountable for how things are used, right? Maybe let's just start with the state hospital example. What do you think is the best way for people to make sure that their tax money is being used appropriately?
I think that really the answer is going ahead and looking at the micro scale of politics. If we get enough people who can represent, individuals that really do care about mental health, we will see that eventually. It can work its way up there. I'm not saying every single, everything depends upon the politician, but it depends upon you and me.
Okay, so we've been discussing a little bit about politics and how it influences the mental health care. So again, what can people do to kind of make a difference in that? Is it just about voting for the right people, or what do you think might help solve that problem?
I think one of the things that we need to do is pay special and close attention to, local government as well as our local NAMI chapters and
Okay.
how much interactions going on between those two.
Tell me what NAMI is. I know, but I want to make sure everybody else knows.
Okay. So that is the National Alliance of Mental Health
Okay.
or mental illness, better yet.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, is my dyslexia showing?
Hey,
So,
we all got something, right?
true. So, NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness,
Hmm.
and it is a big nonprofit that is focused on the education of people and families about mental health. They do walks, they do suicide walks, they sometimes do fun runs, depending on which chapter it is. They do events. They will hold booths for in festivals just to go ahead and get people more aware of mental health.
Hmm.
And I think the collaboration between micropolitics and NAMI is very important to pay attention to. Like NAMI, like other nonprofit organizations, applies for grants so that they can go ahead and hold meetings in meeting houses and they can go ahead and educate people. So I think that it's very important to go ahead and kind of keep those two in mind.
So do you
And
think if like people want to make a difference in mental health, would NAMI be a good way to go? Like get involved in your local program, see what's going on like in your area, in your state. Okay.
completely. And there are other organizations out there as well, but NAMI is probably the largest one in the United States that is active in all of the states that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Uh,
I know when like I, was learning about mental health and stuff, especially when I was, kind of struggling myself. I found a lot of really good positive information on NAMI's website. They had just some of the best articles on like medications, on therapies, on whatever, that I actually could find online. So, I know at least I link to that often with the anxious resistance stuff. I will link to the National Alliance on Mental Illness because I think they have some of the best resources. So interesting that you bring that up. So get involved in NAMI. Make sure you're aware of local politics. Any kind of just final advice on how people can make a difference in their community in local, mental illness stuff.
I think self-education is probably the best thing that we can do. More often than not, you will find yourself with a lack of people who are really educated about mental health and mental illness. And the greatest thing that you can do for, your local community, your family, yourself is self-educate. So go ahead, hit up
Keep
Barnes and
learning,
Noble.
huh?
What no, learn more about the anxious resistant.
That's a good way to go.
Go ahead and start with that.
Well, we're probably getting close to the end of our interview here, but is there anything like on the horizon that you're seeing, as far as like treatments that like kind of get you excited that you think are going to make a big difference for you, your patients, and others? What are you excited about in mental health?
I'm very excited about new treatment with the FDA being much more relaxed on certain medications and treatments such as ketamine. That was a huge forward. I suspect that they will probably do the same thing with other hallucinogenic medications that seem to have really good results, frankly. I
Yeah.
can tell you from a firsthand that I've seen many people go ahead and do treatments with ketamine, and it's life changing for them.
Yeah. So where we work, we do ketamine fairly often. With our general patient population, I would say we do almost an average of one a day, maybe one every other day of a ketamine treatment.
And that's a lot,
That,
honestly.
that is a lot. Yeah.
Is a lot. And I don't know if viewers are aware of that, but being in a very red Republican, not so friendly towards, treatments like that, that's great. It's so much
Is
progress.
is pretty popular in Utah, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say it's getting to be much more popular. Things like that and potentially opening up more treatment options such as medications that will have DMT involved and or possibly the use of ibogaine or ayahuasca and things like that. Yes, I do not endorse the use of illegal medications, but
Okay.
I do certainly endorse the use of medications that do have scientific backing and proof that they do help out. Um,
You think people
in
should
my,
self-medicate? We just want to make it clear.
I do not believe in self-medication. I
Okay.
believe in seeking specialists who understand your condition
Okay.
and
I
are
think that's
capable
100% correct. I agree
of
with you.
helping you with what you need. As someone who studies medical anthropology, my new thing is studying the use of medical tourism with psychiatry. And I'm very glad to say that the United States is beginning to turn around and that we're available to use things like ketamine and that we are getting more and more options.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was the 1960s. I can't remember exactly what year the Controlled Substance Act came out. It was like 69, 70, something in there. But just kind of blanket banned all of those substances, right? The the MDMAs, the psilocybins, some of those other ones that you mentioned, and then they just became not available like at all. And that we're able to kind of roll that back a little bit, because we're like, okay, well, we see some potential for medical applications here. And, you're saying you're excited about it. I'm excited about it too, because I think it's gonna make a big difference for people, that we can use these medications in an appropriate way, and that
Right.
we're able to do that. So that's a really interesting point that you bring up. So
It brings a huge relief to mental health institution because the same individuals that are getting help will not be coming back for a while or perhaps ever if they are properly medicated and treated with those medications. If we go ahead and we look at the time frame that it takes for a person to go ahead and the cost of being in an institution for a few days versus that of having a ketamine treatment, of course the economics are going to point towards the ketamine being more effective
right.
and probably not nearly as expensive, and it's just so much better.
And I think you and I both know this pretty well, but if we can keep more patients out of the inpatient scenario, the better, right? Because
I pray for the day that I don't have patients to take care of.
right. Well, and inpatient is just it's a little bit difficult. Inpatient psychiatry doesn't make money. Hospitals don't like to put a lot of resources into mental health in inpatient psychiatry because of that. Or those who do, have a decent profit margin psych, it's because they cut a lot of corners, and they just kind of cut back wherever they can, and that results in poor care and staff that are burned out and not very effective, and that kind of thing too. So if we can shuffle mental health care more towards the outpatient scenario, where we can do treatments like ketamine, where we can do psilocybin assisted psychotherapy or whatever, we can really increase the effectiveness of mental health care and kind of eliminate some of the issues. And that's kind of what you're saying too, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, like you said, I really, if there could ever be a more perfect scenario, I think it would be that everything would go more upon the outpatient services rather than inpatient services.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that as a personal relief, but more so that if people were able to go ahead and receive help before they needed the assistance of being in an inpatient environment, that would be all the better. A very wise man told me that the greatest medicine is a healthy lifestyle. And I believe very fervently that going ahead and meeting with your local therapist and psychiatrist and making sure that you're good and you're in check it's the best medicine possible. It's the best thing possible. Although, if an individual is to ever feel that they are in need of further assistance and they may not feel safe with themselves, I have to say, coming to an inpatient psych facility is a great choice.
Yeah, I would agree. And we don't want to dissuade anyone from, seeking that help should they need it, because that option is there. It is always there. And it is something that, I don't think inpatient's ever going to go away completely,
They'll never.
but I think you're right, where an ounce of prevention in mental health is worth a pound of the cure, right? So if we get ahead of it, if we're able to learn the skills that we need and have the knowledge, educate ourselves, we can kind of prevent it from getting to the more worst case scenarios.
I also think cats are a great way to go ahead and help manage that. So,
Like, hey, we know that's evidence based, right? That having pets can very much help your mental health.
oh,
So,
certainly.
so, well, Drake, I really appreciated having you here, and I consider you a friend and a great coworker. And so I appreciate you being here and for sharing your wisdom and some of your experiences with the anxious resistance audience. Is there anything else you kind of want to leave us with? Maybe a message, and yeah, what are some final thoughts from you?
It comes down to three things. The first is check out your local NAMI chapter. See what they've got going on. If they don't have anything going on, make a point to try to get involved. Do something. Be an advocate. You don't need to have a fancy degree to do that. Second, go ahead and to take care of yourself. Speak to a therapist. Reach out to your local medical provider if needed. And thirdly, I would have to say, go ahead and be open to helping others. And if you can go ahead and be open to helping others with their situations and you're familiar with enough resources, that doesn't just affect you, that affects a whole community of people. But it begins with you.
Right.
And fourthly, if I may, it's keep an eye on the anxious resistant. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And it's only going to get better from here, people. It's only going to get better.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Drake.
Of
One
course.
of our best supporters here, and I very much appreciate your thoughts, your feelings, and yes, thanks again for joining us.
Of course. Yeah.